This is a step-by-step walkthrough of creating a 3-generation classic family tree in Microsoft Excel. Here's an example of what the end result can look like with your grandparents, parents, and the home person, each with a family photo nicely sized above the first and last name fields. The first thing we're going to do is give ourselves a new blank page. Step 1 is to set it to landscape mode. Let's go up to File, Print, and here the default for a new sheet is actually Portrait, which isn't what we want. We want to set this to the landscape orientation. And when we go back to the page, you'll now see dotted lines that represent the printed area for landscape. I'm going to highlight within this dotted line, and then I'm going to set the print area. So I'm going to Page Layout, Print Area, Set Print Area. And now I see a fixed line. I want to be sure that I don't stray outside those lines. For page setup, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the font. I'm going to work up in the Home tab, up in the ribbon here. Expand that, and I'm going to fix it in place because I'll be doing a few things in this particular tab. The default font with the latest versions of Excel is Calibri, size 11. I'm not wild about Calibri, it's a personal choice. I'm going to use Arial. If you do want to change the font for the name fields, the easiest thing to do is to change it for the entire sheet. Control A to select every cell on the sheet, then choose the font that you want. I'm going to take Arial here. Leave the size at 11. That's big enough to be nicely legible when printed. The next thing I'm going to do is to set the column width. At the moment, notice that columns A to N are fitting within the landscape boundary. Yours may be O or maybe M. It really depends on your setup. I'm going to work with a smaller number of wider columns. I'm working with columns A through to G, and I'm going to change their width size. I'm going to widen the width to 16.5. So to do this, select all the columns A to G. It's highlighted them, the entire column is selected. Right click and choose column width. It will currently be set to the default, which is somewhere between 8 and 9, depending on your machine. I'm going to change this to 16.5. Click OK. And notice that that is still within the landscape boundary. So the edge of G is the landscape boundary to fit into a single printed page. If you see that column G is beyond the landscape boundary, then you have a different machine setup than mine. Adjust the width size downwards. We still want these 7 columns, A to G, but be sure that the G isn't spilling over beyond the boundary. So just adjust the width down to try 16, try 15.5. You'll find the sweet spot. The next thing I'll say is that you don't need to scribble down these numbers I'm giving you, and I will be giving you a few more. We have a companion article on our website, which I'll put a link in the description below, which has all the details. So at the moment, I'm at this step 2, set the font and column widths. Just jump down there. And as you can see, I'm giving the width size here. I also have a cheat sheet that you can download for free. It's a 1-pager with the numbers that I'm giving. I'm at the page setup, and here I'm giving you the numbers to set. For grandparent number 1, the name fields are going to be in cells A7 and A8, first name and last name. So I'm going to set these cells with a background color. My preference for the paternal ancestors is a light blue. I'm then going to give the 2 cells a border, an outline border around the 2 cells. To do so, up here, expand the border collection and choose outside borders. You can go thick if you want. I just prefer a nice thin border. So now we have a name field that could be, let's say it's Thomas Postlethwaite. Nice long name. But suppose you have a longer name. Let's say it's Postlethwaite Botham. The problem here is that it spills into the next cell, and when it prints out, it's just not going to look great. What I want is that the name truncates, so it only shows what fits in the cell. There's various ways to achieve this. The simplest way that I prefer is simply to place a space into the adjacent cell. So I'm clicking into cell B7, hitting a space. I'm clicking into cell B8 and I'm putting in a space. And now when I click away, you can see that the name is truncated, which is exactly what I want. So now I have 4 cells that together make up the first grandparent. Everything gets easier from here on in. In order to give myself the 3 other grandparents, I simply copy these 4 cells, A7, A8, B7, B8, Control C, place my cursor into cell C7 and Control V. That brings over the 4 cells. I do the same into cells E and then into cells G. At this point, you may notice this working cell here is beyond the printed boundary. That's okay, because we don't want to display this empty space anyway. So got 4 grandparents here with these placeholder names, but something still isn't quite right. I would like a different color for my maternal ancestors. It's just a choice. I'm going to highlight C7 and C8, and I'm going to use the fill here just to change this to this light orange. And similarly for G7 and G8, light orange. Don't scribble down the cell numbers. You can either use the article or the 1-page cheat sheet where I've got all the details here. So working with that cheat sheet, it's giving the instructions for the parents, and that is to copy the 4 cells of the first grandparent to these 2 cells, B18 and F18. So let's just go ahead and do that. Switching back to my cheat sheet, the last step for the name fields is the home person. So once again, we're selecting the 4 cells that are pre-formatted, and we're now going to copy them to D29. 4 cells, Control C, D29. Click away, and you can see that is a symmetric family tree construction. Now I'm just going to set the color of the mother to this pink, and depending on who this person is, leave it at blue or this light orange, I should say. We're missing something. We're missing the connector lines. That's a little bit fiddly. I'll give you plenty of tips just to speed up the process and not to be spending forever fiddling around with moving lines. Just to remind ourselves at the look that we're going for, what I prepared earlier. So we've got 2 short vertical lines, this horizontal line beneath them, and then this long vertical line. To draw lines in Excel, we use what's called the shapes feature. So we insert a shape onto the page, and then we can position it and size it correctly. So go up to the Insert tab, Illustrations, Shapes. We want the lines. I don't want the one with any arrows. I want this straight line. Just click that and then put your cursor roughly where you want to go and just draw a very short line. Don't worry about the length for the moment. Now that we've got this line on the page, the first thing I want to do is to change the color to black. I think it defaults to a kind of a light blue or possibly a gray. This is black here. Then I want to position it so that it's reasonably central and that it intersects the box. My main tip is not to use the mouse for precise positioning. Instead, use the arrows on your keyboard. When you have the line selected, just a click on an arrow just nudges the line slightly in that direction. The trick here, in terms of the intersection, is to use the circle as your guide. So that now is intersecting. You don't really see that until you click away, which is a bit annoying, but that's about of an intersect. Now, is this central? It's difficult to see because we've got an empty box. The trick here is to put in a very long random letter last name as a temporary measure. I'm just going to click into this box. I'm going to not bother with the first name. So I hit the enter key to come down to the second line, and now I'm going to put in very long last name. It's got 14 characters that are displayed, and therefore we halfway along is about between 7 and the 8th character. So once again, I'm going to click it, and I'm going to use the right arrow key to move it slightly to the right and get it beneath the G. That is about halfway along. The next thing is we're going to set the length. I'm going to set this quite precisely. I'm going to right click, go to size and position, and I am going to set the height to be 1 centimeter. So now I've got that in place. I'm going to copy that line to give me a second line under the spouse. So Control C, Control V. Now I've got to move it to be reasonably centered. And then I'm just going to use the circle to do the intersect. That is intersecting. Is it in the center? I'll just copy very long last name. Now I need to move it slightly to the right with my arrows, and that is centered. Back now to the next line that I want to put in place, which is the horizontal line that intersects the bottom of both these vertical lines. So I'm just going to, just copy one of the lines, pull it down a bit, and now I'm just going to use drag and drop to pull this up, and I'm going to use the vertical grid line just to make sure that it actually is horizontally aligned. So I'm just going to move that up a little bit. Is that straight? Is that a straight line? Yes, it is a straight line. So at this point, I'm going to get the left side aligned and intersecting with the left vertical line. You'll see why in a minute, why I'm focusing on the left side. But I just want to make sure that that is, let me have a look and see, is that what I want? Oh, it is. Now I've got the left-hand side aligned. I'm going to use the width control. So I've highlighted the line. I've got the format shapes open here. I'm going to use this arrow just to nudge the length, and it lengthens it to the right. That's why we kept the left side. We've got left side fixed in place, and this width just lengthens it by expanding to the right. And that's exactly what we want. So that was line number 3. The last line we want is the line that comes down from here to here. Again, I'm going to copy a vertical line. I am going to get that into place. Don't bother too much about the central positioning. For now, we want to get the length correct. So I'm just nudging it up at the moment with the arrow, and I'm watching the circle. And I think that is on the money. Selecting the vertical line, I'm going to use the height, and I am going to just keep nudging it up, and you can see the circle is approaching the shape, and I just want to get it to intersect, and there it is intersecting. But I don't think that is centered. This time I'm going to put into the first name, I'm going to put very long last name. I want the same number of characters, but it just wanted to be on the first line. So I said it had to be between the N and the G to be centered. So I'm going to nudge it slightly to the right. There we go. So if that was all a bit finicky, the good news is that we can use copy and paste for the next set of grandparents. We don't even have to select and copy the lines because that can be a bit fiddly. Instead, we can just copy the cells in which the lines appear. So put your cursor into A9, hold down the Shift key, and select all the required cells. So that's A9, B9, C9, and then hold the Shift key and come down with the arrows, with the arrow key, and come all the way down to the row 16. So that's A16, B16, and C16. So we have this set of cells selected, going to Control C. Then I'm going to put my cursor into row E9 and I'm going to click Control V to paste the lines. And as you can see, they are perfectly aligned for us based on what we did for the first set of grandparents. Neat trick, right? And finally, we're going to put in the connector lines for the parents. So I'm going to do this trick again. It won't quite work in terms of the alignment, but it saves a little bit of time. Copy the area that holds the connector lines, Control C, put my cursor into B19, cell B19, Control V, and we get a start. I now have to change the positioning of these lines. First things first is to work with the rightmost vertical line. Use the arrow key, the right arrow key, just to nudge that across. You can align it with the vertical line above it. Just make sure it all lines up. So by moving the vertical line across, I simply now have to lengthen the horizontal line. Once again, I right click, size and position, and then I use the width arrows to just keep clicking up, moving the line across until the circle intersects. And now I need to get the longer vertical line into place. I'll simply move it across to the approximate position. I don't think that's centered, but I'll do that next. I'm just going to deal with the height. So format shape is already open. So now I use the height arrows to increase the height until it intersects with the bottom name box. There we go. And once again, I'm going to use my very long last name trick. Last name. And I'm going to nudge this line across to the right with the right arrow until it is above the G. That's it, the classic family tree in Excel. So we've got the plain format. I've also given you lots of space for a tree with family photos. These are sized in Excel terms, which is centimeter by centimeter, 2.38 times 2.38 centimeters. Many applications use pixels. That's 90 times 90 pixels. So the last thing I'm going to do is show you how to add a photo into your plain family tree. I just toggle back to the plain tree. I'm assuming you have your photo on your local machine, nicely sized at about 90 times 90 pixels or perhaps slightly larger. Go to Insert, Illustrations, and this time choose Pictures. We're going to choose Insert Picture from this device, meaning my own machine. That gives me an Explorer window. I just need to go find my picture. Here we go. Select that, click this Insert, and it just plops it there. And now you can use the arrow keys to move up and slightly to the right and get this nicely positioned. If you want to get creative, or if you have a youngster with a graphical bent, there are other things you can do with pictures. Microsoft also provide a set of stock images. I'm just going to put tree into the search here, and you can grab one of these icons, click Insert. Suppose I wanted as an illustrative icon down here. I would now right click and choose a nice color, let's say dark green, etc. There's also a leaf symbol that you might find also appropriate. There's ample scope to play around with the stock images. Right, so if you got this far, that was quite a tutorial. Well done. And you may also be thinking, well, this is actually quite a lot of fiddly work. If that's the case, then I've got a solution for you.